Hi, everybody, and welcome to Chapter 2 of Introduction to Child Development. This week is about the various types of programs that we see in early care and early childhood education. And so we will just dive right in with this PowerPoint presentation. So here we go. Chapter 2, types of programs. So as a review from last week, there are 3 core components of DAP. DAP being developmentally appropriate practices, as you've learned by now. And that is that what is known about the child's development and learning, what is known about each child as an individual, and what is known about the social and cultural context in which the children live. So all 3 of those are obviously very important to DAP. So to put DAP in action, programs are designed based on what we know about young children. And that's the kinds of things that we learn in our school classes, in workshops, in continuing education, what the research tells us, what experience has taught us about all children and how they learn. And then what we add to what we know book-wise is what we know about each individual child. So that's where our relationships with them become very important to make DAP work. So these 2 work together to make decisions about the program. So here we've got we're going to have several slides about what DAP looks like. So on this one, you see programs and curriculum respond to children's interests as well as their needs. They respond to children's interests. So yes, you're planning curriculum. You're not just letting every day go based on the whims of the children and where they want to go. You're planning curriculum, but you're planning it based on what you've assessed that the child's interests are and where they are at developmentally and what they need to learn. And with DAP, children are actively involved in their own learning, choosing from a variety of material and equipment. So our job there comes into making sure that we're providing quality materials, equipment, learning opportunities. So they're not just free choice of random toys around or of very few toys to choose from. They've got some choice in what's provided. And then, as you have already heard and will hear many times, play is the primary context in which children learn and grow. But again, that's providing meaningful learning opportunities. I can remember discussing with a friend who's not in any way an early childhood person some time ago about, my job here at the college and what I do and teaching teachers. And I said something about curriculum planning, and she kind of scoffed at the idea that there would be curriculum for children. And she thought that was overreaching and too much. And I'm sure that came from a place of, what you hear about too much emphasis on being on academic learning. And I don't think she was thinking about what I meant and what we mean is that we're planning curriculum, but yeah, it's all based around play. And so of course I explained that to her, but it still does need to be planned play though. And so of course we understand that curriculum is important. And I think she just misunderstood what I was talking about and went to an assumption about what you hear about in the news and things like that. So play. All right, DAP also looks like teachers applying what they know about each child and using a variety of strategies, materials, and learning experiences to be responsive to individual children. So what we know about each child and their family, we've got to keep that in mind. We can't fully know the child without knowing what their family is to them and how that dynamic works. And DAP also looks like teachers considering widely held expectations about each age group and tempering that with challenging yet achievable learning goals. So yes, every child is individual and not every child is going to fit into, here's what we think a 2-year-old can do, here's what we think a 3-year-old can do. But we do have some general ideas of what children can do at different stages. So that's a good place to start and then individualize based on what we learn about our classes and our children. And of course, teachers understand that any activity has the potential for different children to realize different things, even though they're learning from the same experience. they might go somewhere different with it. And continuing with what DAP looks like, it's all aspects of development. That's physical, social, emotional, cognitive, and language. They're integrated in the activities and the opportunities. And that includes opportunities for dual language learners to still also have all of these different domains addressed in their learning. So how does DAP benefit children's learning? Well, the first thing on here says, in constructing children's own understanding of concepts and benefits from instruction by more competent peers and adults, but they're constructing their own understanding of concepts. And unfortunately, as learners get older, we forget how important this part is. And as children go through school, like I said, when they get older, we have information is so often just fed to them. Here, take these notes, take this information down, get this information, and we don't allow enough opportunity for them to construct their own meaning of things as they get older. But I'm getting on a soapbox, I guess. Well, we're focusing on young children, and we're still doing that with them. And so that's one of the ways of making DAP work. And then it benefits children's learning through opportunities to see connections across disciplines through integration of curriculum and opportunities to engage in depth study. So just like we talked about, connections to the cognitive and the social, emotional, and the physical, and just really putting all of those together. And it benefits learning with predictable structure and routine in the learning environment, and from the teacher's flexibility and spontaneity in responding to their emerging ideas, needs, and interests, responding to them. So realizing what's going on, what the children's needs are, and responding in the moment, but also responding in our planning as we move forward. So that responsiveness is key. All right, it also makes meaningful, that benefits their learning by making meaningful choices about what children will do. From situations that challenge children to work at the edge of their capacities, and from ample opportunities to practice newly acquired skills. So we don't want to go too far and take them past their abilities, or they'll be overwhelmed and shut down and not learning. But we also still want to push them. So we better recognize what they can do and take them just as far as we can with that to be able to get them to grow beyond that. It assists children to develop a positive sense of self and respect for others. Okay, so they're developing a sense of self when we use DAP because, like we talked about in that other slide, they're constructing their own understanding. So that gives them self-confidence and a sense of who they really are, that, hey, I can do it. I can put this together. They've also got to realize that other children might go a different direction with what they're putting together. And so we as the adults have to address that and encourage it being okay that Jimmy came up with something different than Jane did, and that they recognize and respect that from each other. That benefits their learning by capitalizing on their curiosity and their capacity to learn. And that's it. Children are curious and want to learn. So I think it's, sometimes when that gets taken away, it's by society and the world around them and by adults. We should be encouraging that curiosity always. And that benefits their learning by promoting self-initiated, spontaneous play, along with teacher plan structured activities, projects, and experiences. Again, we must provide the right opportunities for that. And there can be structure there, but not too much. The perfect example is doing an art project versus doing a craft project. A craft is too structured. It's here, put this piece here, and at the end, everybody's looks the same. But art, we provide them with the right materials to accomplish something, and they come up with their own product. And that can relate to other domains as well. That's just, I think, a really clear example of it. Okay, so developmentally and culturally appropriate practice. addresses the social and cultural context in which children live, highlights the intentionality to connect a child's sense of cultural continuity between home and school. And I recommend you look at page 31. Of course, this is all just an outline of your chapter, but on page 31, there's more depth about culturally appropriate practice. The definition there being curriculum that helps children understand the way individual histories, families of origins, and ethnic family cultures make us similar and yet different. So yeah, we're all part of one community in our classroom, and as humans all over the world have some things in common, we also have differences based on different experiences in our lives. So yeah, I just recommend you look at page 31 for more elaboration on that. Also, if you haven't taken diversity yet, we'll get into that a lot. So they're switching from DAP to the different programs now. Page 32. Well, sorry, I won't talk about page 32 yet. There are several early childhood core programs. Programs can be both formal and informal, public or private, full day or half day, academic or enrichment. They can be free, have a fee, or be completely privately funded by the parents. And they can be homey or they can be school-like. So lots of different types of programs. And a lot of times that has to do with, hopefully you recognize your own in there and as we move forward. But a lot of times the types of programs are determined by many different factors, and those are really elaborated on page 32. They exist to serve a number of needs, and sometimes those overlap. And so like I said, you can read about those on 32, but maybe the whole reason that a center exists is just to provide care while parents are working. And that's their main goal. And hopefully, there's some social interaction going on, and hopefully there's some learning going on, but the main goal is we've got to have somewhere for our kids to be while we're at work. There are also enrichment programs, and sometimes those are just half day. Maybe the parents don't necessarily need somewhere for the children to go, but they want some social interaction and some learning. There are educational programs for the parent and the child. There are activity arenas for children, specialized setting for children with special disabilities. There's academic readiness instruction, which sounds very formal, but really we're talking about kindergarten there. Culturally or religious specific programs, philosophy specific programs like Montessori, things like that. And there are some that are training. They're designed to, they keep children, but they're designed to be training the teacher, like you all. In a lot of other programs in other states, the college might have a program where students work, and that's where you do your field experiences. We are, sometimes I feel like we're missing out on that. It'd be nice to have and see you all in person, of course, but it's also wonderful that y'all are, that we have the scholars program that many of you get to take advantage of, and that y'all are getting to work while you're in school and getting all those experiences. So the factors that determine types of programs, like on this slide. So along with the things that we just talked about, there's all these things on this screen. Goals, of course, are going to be, what goal are you hoping? And that will be some of the things that we just covered. Goals and purposes of the program, but also you've got to look at requirements, and that would be the requirements basically of where the money comes from, who's funding this program, and what do they want to see come out of it. If it's government funded in some way, they're probably going to have some things that they want to see happen. When you're a completely private program where parents are paying their money, parents are going to have some say in what they want to happen, probably. The quality of teaching can determine your program, but that I think is also going to be determined by the cost of the program. What how much money is coming in to be able to pay quality teachers and afford quality teachers. So just lots of different factors can determine, and you can read about those all more in your book, of course. Okay, so a couple different things we also see is mixed age groupings. And so that's younger children and older children all together at the same time, usually not below 1 year old because infants need specific care. But once they get to a year old, sometimes they're grouped with older children. And you can see here a list of the theories behind it, why it's done, what it can help do. Of course, these are elaborated on in your book, like I said. And then here's more about the mixed age grouping. So these are kind of being touted as being new, this and the next one we're going to talk about looping, but really they've existed for a long time because it's how, when communities were smaller throughout history, it's how we taught children, and not even in that long a history. My father will be 80 this month, and until 8th grade, I think, maybe it was younger than that, but for a lot of years, he was in a one-room schoolhouse, basically. He was out in a rural community, and they had kindergarten didn't exist. They started in 1st grade, but they were all in one room. And, it requires individualized teaching. The teacher's got to be able to juggle a lot of things at once, but it also provides opportunities for the older to work with the younger and step up and sometimes understand things better because, part of learning is being able to explain it to someone else. If you can explain a concept to someone else, you've definitely got it. So anyway, this is not new, but it is having a reemergence, as is, well, first we'll talk about the risks. Older children taking over and overwhelming the younger children. Possibility that the younger children will pester the older children and bug them when they're trying to do more serious work and the younger children are needing to play more. And it requires having not just monitoring, but really being able to individualize things. So that's mixed age group. Also, there's looping, which is keeping a group of children and their teacher together in the same class for at least 2 years. And I know I've had students in the past who have had this, and they loved it and thought that they really got to know the children. And again, this would have been kind of the same as with, in those one-room schoolhouses we think about. They were just looping for more than 2 years. But it offers, it offers stability and emotional security because they know that they've got that teacher that's loved and cared for them for a while. And I see advantages of this even later on. I taught high school for a lot of years, and I always had every single 9th grader and every single 10th grader that was in that school. And I really enjoy 9th graders, so I liked them at that age. But then by their 10th grade year, I also enjoyed them in a whole different way because we had gotten to know each other. We formed a community. We had all bonded. They knew my expectations. I knew their abilities. And so 10th grade was also always a lot of fun because we were in our 2nd year together. And then, of course, I still got to see them as they were in high school. So we had really bonded and formed a relationship, and that was nice. And so I think it's not just an early childhood thing, but can be beneficial at lots of levels. So that's what that's what people will say is good about it. But opponents of it say that it requires too high of a need for experienced teachers who enjoy teaching across the age levels and can work with the same children for an extended time. So that would be different than what I was talking about with my 9th and 10th graders. I had my 9th graders at one time and my 10th graders at one time. So I didn't have them all in there at the same time, but I did get to get those stability and emotional benefits with them. So the core programs of early childhood education, we've got traditional nursery school or preschool. And that would be like Mother's Day Out or a program that's just half day or something. And it really is not, it's not daycare. It's not because the parents are going to work. It's because it's just to teach the children and get them some social interaction and start working on some cognitive things. There's an example schedule of that in your book, what it would look like on page 35. And so that's just traditional nursery school or preschool. Then we get to universal preschools. That's offered by a growing number of school districts for pre-kindergarten, and talks down here about nearly 40 states have pre-kindergarten initiatives. The last time I did research on this, Oklahoma was highly acclaimed for our pre-K programs in our schools, and just really being on the forefront of the country for making sure that pre-K was in our public schools and heavily funded. And it's still not required. Children, you know, we aren't making parents send their 4-year-olds, but it is offered and highly funded in Oklahoma, which shows that we are making early childhood education a priority. And so there are a lot of things about education that I think Oklahoma does not do right, but I've got to say that we've made early childhood a pretty good priority in several ways, at least. Like I said, in our pre-K programs, through the Scholars Program, I think that sends a huge message. The fact that we, have a government-funded program that pays for all of you to get your education, I think says a lot about that we're investing in the education of young children in that way. So, like I said, if you talk to me very long, you'd hear me complain a lot about things that Oklahoma does education-wise, but I will admit that they do a couple of things right. And then there are full-day child care programs, which is, it's my experience that that's what most of you are working in. You can read these, and of course it's elaborated on in your book. You do have quizzes this week over this type of, that will ask you questions about the differences in all of these. And part of full-day childcare often is, this one was center-based, then we've got home centers, and I sometimes have students who are running their own home centers. So thank you all for providing that. All right, and then we've got Head Start, which we're all pretty familiar with, and some of you work in. Those guiding principles are elaborated on in your books, and since this is a federal government program and federally funded, they have Head Start has lots of expectations and checkpoints, and people making sure that they're adhering to all of these. So Head Starts are generally thought of as doing a pretty good job. We've got infant and toddler programs that I'm not going to just read these. Y'all can read them and read the elaborations in your book. Towards kindergarten, and I do think that it seems like most states have switched now to full day rather than half day kindergarten. Early elementary through 3rd grade is still considered early childhood education. And so since we've talked about the different types of programs, it's an appropriate time in the chapter to talk about assessing the quality of programs. And just like the reason we assess children, we assess our program to plan. We can't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been or where we currently are. So we need to take actions to assess programs. You've got a checklist on page 43, which you actually use for an assignment this week to assess the quality of your program. And there are various ways to do that. When I visit during your capstone class, your last child development class you take, I can visit your facility, and I use a NACCE checklist. And of course, you're not all NACCE accredited, but that's just what I used kind of as talking points. But it is a list that you could, even without being NACCE accredited, you could use on your own, just kind of assess yourself. Sometimes it's more detailed than the one on page 43. It's several pages long, but like I said, it can still be used internally. So one of the things listed on this list, one of the reasons to assess is to acquire accreditation, to be affiliated with a larger organization. So, Head Start, like we talked about, is assessed by internal people who assess within Head Start, and meeting DHS requirements and things like that. But you can also gain accreditation through outside sources. My experience, of course, is with NACCE, because that's who I'm accredited through. But NACCE can acquire higher ed institutes like I am and make sure that we're meeting certain standards in teaching you all. But childcare facilities can also go a different direction with NACCE and be accredited as a childcare facility. And so there would be assessments that would have to be done to make sure you were meeting the requirements of that accreditation. But I think just an important reason to assess is to plan, to improve, to make sure you know where you're going. And that's assessment all around, like I said. So assessment helps us set goals, helps us to have expectations and know how they're being met. And like I said, there are lots of good assessment tools out there, and everybody should be involved in that process. Everybody working at a center should be involved in that process. And this just talks about the end of your chapter and talks about different assessments. So that is the summary of your chapter. And I'm going to look at your module real quick for the week. Share the right screen. Okay, so now we are in the week 4 module. And this is where the video will be. It's by the time you're watching this. Your objectives and standards are going to meet this week. The chapter reading, types of programs, just some additional downloads from the chapter. And then you're partaking in discussion, which if you haven't already read it, this week is about how your feelings on T1 or not T1 specifically. That's just the example I took off with, but your thoughts on T1 or children repeating early grades or waiting to enter school. It's referred to as redshirting in your textbook, but just read page 41 and share your thoughts with one another, as a couple people already have, it looks like. And you've got a video case to watch and respond to. And then you have 2 quizzes. And you get to that assignment I was talking about, where you're going to use the chart on page 43 to assess your program. And then you're going to write 1 paragraph before you do that, explaining why program assessment is important. Then you're going to assess your program. Then you're going to write a 2nd paragraph critiquing your findings, good and bad. And so that's that, other than the key assessment this week, which is to start documenting your observations. So document them however you need to, whatever you like to do. It could be sticky notes, just little cards, a small notebook. Take pictures on your phone. They're going to remind you. You can do that. You could use your phone to do a little voice recording. But just observe both children. Based on your observations, you're going to decide. Let me go look at your template. Sorry. Okay. Based on your observations, you're going to decide which category they fit in. Be that cognitive, physical, or social emotional. Okay. So here they are. So child 1, you're going to decide if each thing that you observed was physical. So you should end up with 6 physical development observations, 6 social emotional, and 6 cognitive. Okay. So think about what you're going to share, decide which one of those 3 it is, and put it on the child 1 chart based on where it is. Okay. So you're going to tell what day it was, the code name you've given the child, any other children who were involved, and just tell a little bit about what happened. And then you've got a whole second chart for child 2. So same thing. And these do not have to go in order. You're not going to have to get all 6 physical before you can move on to any of the others. You're going to decide and put them on a chart where you think they belong. So I believe that's all I have. When you do your discussion this week, I posted an announcement last week about the difference in a reference and an artifact. So when you do your references, that's what you've all been doing great. You reference your textbook to provide evidence. An artifact is something that you can share with the learning community that helps you in your work and might also help them. Of course, it needs to pertain to that week's topic. But so, for example, this week, let's see, we're writing about redshirting in T1. So maybe you find some kind of article that shares statistics about children who do go to T1 versus children who don't. Or maybe you, I don't know, it can be about social media groups that you're in or that you know exist, or blogs you follow, or even just a blog post on a topic. Sometimes in other discussions, an artifact might be, like a form that y'all use at your center or something like that, or a lesson plan that you like to use, or a dance that you like the kids to do. None of those necessarily fit with this, but just anything that contributes to the learning community is what can be an artifact. So I know this got a little long. I hope you watched it on fast speed. But thanks for watching. I hope that you're learning a lot from this class so far. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have anything that you need to talk about. Bye-bye.